All right, moving along. We're down to executive limitations. Our first action item is to accept the monitoring report for 2.7 compensation and benefits. That is now linked to the agenda, so if you have the agenda, you can see it. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to accept the monitoring report.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve. All right. Any discussion? No. Oh, Sarah.
7.
Yep. Kevin.
So I had just a couple questions, comments. Underneath bullet 1, there's plenty of discussion or evidence about employee contracts, teachers, staff, and that sort of thing, but there doesn't seem to be much or any of a discussion about consultants, contract workers, or volunteers, which I don't know if it somehow rolls into the general board statement or not, but it seems like not so much from a financial point of view, because most of those people would be in some sort of a closed loop contract, if you will, or agreement, but there could be something from the point of view of public image if there was some perception of favoritism of how those people were retained. So I just bring that up as it seems like there's, albeit a minor, there doesn't seem to be anything addressed, anything past direct employees. And then the other comment I have is in Appendix D, there's an acronym for something with telecom, which I'm assuming is IT stuff, but it'd be nice to understand what the acronym is. And then under snow plowing, it says multiple vendors, but I would think with the levity of going to the effort to come out with a list of multi-contract, year contract, we'd list individuals as opposed to saying multiple vendors. That's it.
Okay. And I got your email with your worksheet comments.
Thank you.
Sarah McLean, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm just trying to figure this out. Sorry.
I'm just trying to catch them all. All right. Okay, if there's no further comments or discussion, if you want to raise your hand if you are in favor of accepting the monitoring report for 2.7 compensation and benefits. Yes, we're just going to the screen. Okay. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I have to ask the 2 questions, even though I did this a little backwards because I don't have my worksheet here. The first question was the interpretation reasonable? Do I have a thumbs up? Since you... Okay. And did the data demonstrate the reasonableness of the... Okay. All right. I need to sign that. Okay.
And print the worksheet for 2.8.
Okay. I don't have either one.
2.7 as well.
Yep. All right. So the next action item is to accept the monitoring report for 2.8 communication and support to the board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Andrew?
Andrew.
All right. Any, 1 second, you'll be right back. Right, any discussion around 2.8? Yeah, I don't think that came. Usually, Thank you for this. Kevin? We can do
So on item 5, the evidence is vague. It talks about discussions with the board chair, and it would have been probably a good thing to have the board chair close the loop and acknowledge that this discussions. The other thing with item 5 is it talks about discussing with the board any sort of evidence or any sort of departure, and I'm not sure. To me, it seems like we'd be clearer with that in saying the board through the board chair, or the board and or the board chair, something like that. So it gives us the latitude for that conversation to go on. In my simple little mind, if you read it right now, this stuff should be done directly with the board. And I don't know what those conversations were that the superintendent and the board chair had, but I was kind of expecting a little discussion about our FU-FAM that we had earlier this year, as far as the superintendent's perspective of if we did or not, or maybe we didn't, since it's not noted, overstep our bounds with that particular motion we had after a grievance hearing.
I almost feel like that was addressed in the last one. Report, but by us.
I don't recall the timing of it. The first piece, Kevin, I tried to articulate what I thought the policy language for number 5 meant in the interpretation. And the practice has been, and the practice can change, and that would necessitate a change in the interpretation, which is certainly doable. But the practice has been, if there's an individual matter, the infractions of the entire board, that procedurally, if I find there's a violation, I make the board chair aware of it, and then the board chair either handles that with an individual board member if it's a discrete issue with a board member, or brings that attention to the board as a whole. If it's the way the board behaved as a whole. And again, I'd have to check the timing too, as Don said, about the piece coming out of the grievance hearing, as to whether or not that evidence would have been in this or a different monitoring report. But if not, I think that could have been an example of an infraction that certainly Don and I talked about. And that was the trick with this in terms of the evidence, and it's intentionally vague rather than be specific about particular infractions that I make the board chair aware of, and then make that, if it's an individual's behavior, to make that sort of something that's sort of on public display in this document didn't seem appropriate. And that's why the language is left vague.
Kevin?
So I understand all that, and I guess my suggestion, and I don't know if we want to make a motion or some point, or we just take care of it administratively, is to clarify that the discussions would be not necessarily to the board as I literally take the procedure or the policy, but say board and or board chair, and that to me would give the latitude. I'm not necessarily looking for, and I'm not necessarily looking for all my actions to become public knowledge, you know. But this is kind of a nit, but I mean, when you're looking at audits and procedures and that sort of thing, it's the kind of stuff that can start tripping you up if you get an interpretation or there's an opinion that you're doing one thing and handling it a different way.
I think I'm wondering if it isn't in the interpretation that is the piece. I think we should look more closely before we make a motion. Look more closely at the policy language and the interpretation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm fine with that. I just bring it up as something that's like, to me, seems like a conflict.
Okay.
I think procedurally, because that was part of the question too, in terms of how would we address this. So there could be a policy change that might be more clear about how the communication should happen. In the absence of that, the interpretation is where that clarity comes. And in the interpretation, I'm saying that my interpretation is, if I feel a board member or the board is out of compliance with policy governance, I notify the board chair. If it's the board chair that I think is out of compliance, I notify the vice chair. Now that may not be procedurally what the board thinks should happen, and that is a conversation we can have. We can think about, is that a change in interpretation or is that a change in policy? But as it's interpreted currently, that's the practice.
Steve?
Well, I was also curious, is there someplace else in policy where notifying the board is sort of assumed to be de facto if the board chair has been notified? Just in some other earlier administrative section. I'm not familiar enough with it to know. But that would be one thing to also check.
Right, I would agree. That would be a good thing to check for. Krista?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was my point as well, that I think it's a reasonable interpretation, but it could be different depending on different superintendents. And if that's what seems like it's the best practice, it might be something that we would want to be sure is articulated somewhere. You know, it's sort of a chain of command kind of thing. So I think it would be important that if that's how we'd like those matters to be handled, that should be recorded.
Okay, so I think what we could do is put it on a future agenda and look at it and see if it's addressed somewhere else, and if not, then look at, is it through the interpretation or through the policy language that we get to where we need to go?
Yeah, and I think so we have changed some other policies. Actually 2.7 that you approved a few minutes ago was reflected a change from last time, which allowed contracts longer than a year. And procedurally, how that has happened is the meeting following the adoption of the monitoring report is a meeting where typically somebody would bring a draft change to the policy language to address the concerns that were raised. And that offers a starting point for the conversation about, is that the proper language change that should take place? And so I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at changing that language, or it's something Don and I could maybe touch base on between now and the next meeting based on this conversation and the notes, to see if we can make an attempt to offer some new language that codifies this practice.
Well, I would think the interpretation seems reasonable to me. If Patrick and Don wanted to take that interpretation and somehow mold it into the policy, that would seem to make sense. And that's assuming we don't find something earlier that already takes care of this.
Right. So why don't, in the course of the next month, I'll take a look through the policy, and Patrick can take a look through his lens, and we'll see if there's any place where it's already addressed. If it's not, then we'll bring it back next month. And if it is, we'll let you know how we or where we think we found it. Does that work for everybody? All right, Liz found the thumbs up. I don't know where that is.
There's also a clap symbol. Feel free to clap at any point.
All right. Any other questions regarding the monitoring report? Oh, Sarah's clapping. Okay, so the question for the signature page that I need to ask you are, and you can do a thumbs up. Based on the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? All right. Based on the information provided, does the board find that the data demonstrates the accomplishment of this interpretation? All right. All right. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report 2.8, communication and support to the board, please say, raise your hand.
I raise my hand.
All right. Looks like everybody. Okay. We have an update on the financial report that was linked in your packet. Any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, let me get Steve. He's got Steve.
Just one question on the food service. Am I reading it right? We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 grand in the red at the moment.
Let Floyd unmute himself and try to clarify that.
That is correct.
And that's the issue that we're addressing in the next budget?
That's correct.
Okay.
Sarah?
I was just going to ask how you wanted us to sign all those things.
In whatever way Jennifer asked you to.
Okay.
We need to figure that out still.
Okay.
I could work with Jennifer to send a PDF around for signatures.
Yeah, that's what I think we'll need to do is somehow,
Electronic.
yeah.
Caleb has his hand up. Caleb?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that that Adobe or something like that, just a PDF signature would be a nice option to have.
All right. Any other questions regarding the financial report? Kevin?
I've been sitting here debating whether to ask this or not, but given the current situation at hand and the uncertainty of what we're doing and all that sort of stuff, is there any visibility yet or any opinions as to impact to the current and probably even next year's budget?
I think the impact of the budget is going to be pretty minimal. We don't have a lot of clarity yet, but all of the messages we're getting from various state agencies are pretty consistently saying, do what needs to be done, keep track of your expenses, and the finances are going to get taken care of in the end. So I'm not expecting a significant financial impact on this year's budget or next year's budget. And I think the fund balance that we're projecting to be able to end with, given some of the unfilled positions out of this year's budget, if there is some financial impact from this, I think we'll be able to weather that fairly well. Boyd, I don't know if you have any different thoughts. That's where my thinking is.
I'll add one. A silver lining to our food service budget may develop as this unfolds, and depending on how the USDA allows us to bill out the food that we've been delivering. We're certainly not looking at this to solve our food service shortage, but it may close that gap a little bit depending on how long this continues.
And part of what Floyd's speaking to is the amount we're getting reimbursed per meal is greater with the meals that we're creating now than when we provide meals during the school day. So that has a potential to be maybe a significant revenue boost, especially if that lasts for the balance of the school year, which is unknown at this point, but is a possibility.
Kristen?
Yeah, I was just wondering, and this is sort of related to what we're talking about, how many meals per day are generally being distributed?
About 1,800 meals, 900 breakfast, 900 lunch are being made, I should say. And then we're delivering probably in the 1,000 to 1,100 range. And then many more picked up at various sites. And then we do have some that are not being consumed. So Kathy has partnered, and we've talked generally, but Floyd may have more details. Kathy's been reaching out to food shelves and really trying to find creative ways that food is going to be going to good use one way or another.
Katrina,
Thank you.
I was just going to say, to Kevin's question, I also obviously am losing some sleep about the impact on your ends monitoring report in October.
Yeah.
That's a big one for a later conversation.
I'm watching, I've had some tremendous feedback about what the district's doing so far. And I compare that to we've opened up daycare.
Yes, we have.
So no, Patty has, my wife.
Oh,
so
sorry.
We got our grandkids with us during the week because their mom's working. So compared, and they're in the Williston School District. So compared what we're seeing as far as activity engagement in Williston compared to what I'm hearing in Mount Abe, there's just no comparison.
And I want to speak to that for a minute too. I've been sending a lot of communications out, really just profusely thanking lots of people, and that's the reality, right? So the systems we built over the years that we're really tapping into now, as well as the tremendous people we have within those systems, that's the only reason we're doing what we're doing. So the effort that the food service folks have put forth, and then the volunteerism of people getting on those buses and making the meals happen has been great. We crammed in, Katrina and Mandy especially in the days ending last week to gear up for creating childcare, which is not necessarily new, but certainly to pull it together with the haste that we had to, and to have it go as well as it has. We immediately created capacity for 28 children practically overnight, and just the efforts of everybody to step up and do whatever needed to be done to make it happen was really tremendous. And that's all on top of the remote learning that's going, like what we launched in 4 days or something like that basically flipped the education system on its head in all aspects of it is remarkable, to say the least. And it's because we have great people and strong systems. And I agree, as I'm in meetings daily with superintendents from around the state, we are as good, if not ahead of most districts in terms of what we're providing to our community. And that is absolutely something to celebrate.
We had any interest?
That's when you all clap. There you go, Sarah. Nice.
Sorry. Can I jump in?
Sure. You're quiet, so it's hard to hear when you...
Oh, can you hear me now?
Okay, that's better.
Okay. I was just wondering if anyone's expressed interest in the child care.
Yeah, so we have capacity for 28. We had somewhere around the low to mid 20s express interest initially, and we've had 14 to 16 take us up on it. Is that the gist of it, Katrina?
Yes, we had 17 actually on site yesterday and 13 on site today. But we definitely have people who are expressing interest. Everyone's work schedules are changing on the daily. So whether we'll have more people tomorrow because they're coming in, physically 1 day a week, that's all changing for people. But we are ready with enough staff and infrastructure to be able to appropriately screen families and kids and staff every day with nurses when they come in, and they are in safe small groups together in classrooms at Bristol Elementary School. We are working with the food service department to provide breakfast and lunch. and we're moving along. It's actually pretty fun. It's obviously a different conversation with, it's a non-conversation with 3 and 4-year-olds about what social distancing means. So we're just trying to kind of work on what that looks like. Kids have definitely spent the first couple of days building their own forts and their own personal spaces, which is great. The gym has proven to be a great space for all of us. While we have the capacity to have up to 7 kids and 2 adults in each group, we've been at about no more than 5. Today was the largest, 5 kids to 2 adults. But it's been kind of great. I mean, under the circumstances, what we've been able to provide kids and families so that they feel like they can safely go to work and focus on what they need to do for our society has been pretty inspiring.
Krista?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I should have led with that's awesome. So thank you guys. I'm really just so impressed and appreciative of all of that work. And I'm so glad people are able to take advantage of it.
Kristen?
Oh, hi. Yeah, and I work with kids from many different school districts up in Chittenden County, and your rollout has been just, you're correct, the best. And if you guys could help some other places or write well, hopefully this doesn't happen again, but just total great job.
We actually had a Zoom meeting yesterday with a neighboring district trying to help them get something off the ground, and we're continuing to talk with them about the possibility of partnering as we face, continuing this need and the struggles folks are having to get it up and running. So yeah, we've said this a lot in a lot of different conversations, that we feel it's really important that we take care of the MAUSD community and that we are acting as good neighbors as well.
Krista? Krista, do you have
Sorry,
any?
I just never put my hand down. Sorry.
All right. Any other questions on the financial report? Okay. How about an update on the strategic plan?
So
The what?
no, I think it'll be interesting. We're obviously in the monitoring phase right now. Maintenance of learning phase right now for students. But as we hear of this extending, which I think is forthcoming, and we shift into continuity of learning, I think to bring the lens of the strategic plan priority objectives into the conversation about continuity of learning will become important, and thinking about how we can support kids in those priority areas. Other than that, there's no further update on the strategic plan. Lots of strategic planning happening, but not necessarily relative to our strategic
Okay. I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to keep moving. Down to board management and governance, an action item to authorize the superintendent to make hiring recommendations. Sarah? All right. Sarah Lupero. Is there a
Yes.
second? Kristen, second.
So I can share a little bit on this for new board members or a refresher for others. We began this practice last year. As we come into the hiring season, things move pretty swiftly, and when we're trying to secure the best employees we can, oftentimes the best candidates have their choice of jobs. And sometimes if I meet with someone and offer them a position immediately following a board meeting, and I say that we need to wait for 3 to 4 weeks for it to become official from the board, that duration sometimes is unsettling to people, and they may choose to seek employment somewhere else because they can't wait for 3 or 4 weeks to make their decision. So this action that we started last year basically authorized me to make commitments to people for positions that then show up in a consent agenda item for the board to take official action. because by statute, the board has to hire and fire. So this basically is just giving me that authorization to go ahead and hire people, knowing that the official action comes later.
Steve, I see your hand up.
So I recall this from last year. I think I think the action was worded differently. Because you're not making a hiring recommendation, you're providing somebody with a letter of intent or something, aren't you?
Making a commitment, but because I can't hire legally, that's an action that is required of the board. It is technically a recommendation still with pending board action, but it is.
But you're actually notifying the party that you intend to hire them, right? That's the goal. I mean, you make a recommendation to us officially at some point, no matter what, but.
Right, the wording last year was authorize the superintendent to make hiring
Commitments.
Yes.
That would make more sense to me.
Did you go with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an improvement. Yes.
So does somebody just want to amend the motion to read commitments instead of recommendations?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? Sarah LaPearl. Everybody understand we're just going to cross out recommendations and make that be commitments? Okay, so just on the changing of the words, if you're in favor, raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you're in favor of changing recommendations to commitments. Okay. Any opposed? All right. Okay, so now that's been changed. Any further discussion? Okay, so if you are in favor of authorizing the superintendent to make hiring commitments, please raise your hand or give me a thumbs up. Okay, I'm noticing Caleb's not voting. Caleb, are you not voting? Maybe Caleb's not there. All right. All right. Update on negotiations. They're still ongoing. Things have been postponed for this month, and we're continuing to work at it. I think that's as much as we can say. Krista, did you have anything you want to add about community engagement committee?
Sure, just briefly, our last meeting, which you see the minutes for, was, right before everything kind of fell apart. So at the time we had talked about how we could continue to, let folks know what was being worked on. We were talking about sending out a press release if we had confirmed a consultant, which I don't think that's happened yet. So we were planning for sort of how to keep folks, engaged in some level of communication. And then we were also talking about how to have some conversations about some of the bigger picture ideas that people in the community, and I think on the board as well, were interested in exploring that maybe went beyond the scope of what a consultant would be able to gather information on. Since that time, I've just recently sent out a note inviting people to participate, people on the committee to participate in a conference call next week. Amazing how easy it is to schedule a meeting right now. So that's great. And so we'll be talking about the second piece of things. So again, some of those ideas that were generated in our community forums that involve thinking about bigger picture issues around facilities planning. We're going to spend that meeting brainstorming and thinking about how we could engage the community during this time with maybe some online conversations, perhaps led by different people with different information or expertise in those areas. So things like schools as community centers, or advocacy within the legislature, those sorts of things. So nothing determined yet, and I'll report back at our next meeting after we have our call. And the other thing that's just been interesting as a side note is some of the, one of the things we had that came up in the community was this idea of childcare in the schools. So it's just kind of funny how we're doing that now. So perhaps there's some lessons learned about what works and what doesn't work, and could that be part of our formula moving forward? So yeah, I guess the summary is just really, how can we use this time? People, have maybe the space to engage in some conversations. So let's just engage them in some way.
Sarah LaPearl, you have your hand up? I can't hear you. Okay. All right. Anyone else have any comments or questions for Krista? Okay. Next is.
Hey, Don, sorry. Was there a deadline for submitting a letter of interest for the study committee?
Yes, the 30th of March.
Okay.
Okay, all right, next, legislative update, the VSBA. I don't know, has anything happened in a week, Kevin?
Not in the last week, and our last meeting was, let me get it, was the 11th, which seems like 100 years ago. And so I did send out highlights, so hopefully most of you have seen them. There's a few things maybe to just bring up is there was a bill in the Senate that was moving through committee pretty rapidly regarding statewide bargaining for healthcare. The VSBA was pretty happy with most of the changes to that as they were promoting them, including a statewide grievance provision, not allowing final proposals to be altered after arbitration, a cost analysis of submitted with a proposal, and an arbitrator has to state rationale for their decision. There was a couple other provisions that were not necessarily they weren't discussed, and whether they were who perpetuate them or folded them in remains unknown. But there's one that the bill would include a clause to remove superintendents from this activity or the results of this bargaining. And then there was a provision also to appoint alternates to the commissioners on this particular committee. There's another bill in the House that at the time was getting a lot of fodder from the VSBA regarding a teacher's right to seek employment while under contract. If you read what the bill is and what the discussion are, they were very, very different. The bill seems pretty innocuous, but a lot of the testimony that was discussed at the meeting, which was assumed to be the underlying intent of the bill, was that a teacher could basically leave a contract mid-year if they sought employment somewhere else. So that had a fair amount of discussion. Obviously, nobody at the VSBA was in favor of that, and the VSBA was developing a pretty strong position against that. The other thing worth highlighting in the last meeting is we had Professor Tammy Colby there, along with Chloe Wexler, who was from the Joint Fiscal Office, and they discussed the weighting study. It was and emphasize that the intent of the study was to look at tax capacity, not necessarily spending, which is kind of hard to understand, I guess, from different perspectives. And also there was a lot of caution with looking at historical figures, including the FY18 actuals that the report was based on, to accurately project what is or might be happening. And Chloe from the JFO talked quite a bit about the fact that she was updating those projections using fiscal 20-year actuals. And I don't know if that's come out yet or not, or will be coming out anytime soon now. But there was a glimmer of hope that maybe those numbers would more accurately portray what will happen with the weighting study than the 18. One thing they brought up with the 18 numbers is a lot of districts were consolidated. So there's a lot of different operating strategies on budgets now than there was in fiscal year 18. They talked a little bit about yield changing. They also talked a little bit about the excess pupil spending limit may change based on pressures once this could be implemented or if it's implemented. The study also included consideration of Act 173 block grants, but it doesn't, that particular aspect of the study is not going anywhere. And it's interestingly enough, people, their legislature still seems content with going along with a unchanged or so a level block grant as opposed to something that's adjusted based on income or need, educational need, even though it seems like people don't think it's going to work. I don't know why you'd want to go through that without and experience that before you change it, but that seems to be the mindset. So I think that's most of the highlights of what the discussion were. And obviously, like I said, you guys, sending out highlights to, or we're sending out highlights to all the board members in the Addison district. So and hopefully those are a benefit.
Any questions for Kevin? Give the thumbs up, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have our student reps with us tonight, so we're going to skip the community council, and they haven't been there, so we're going to skip the community council update. We do need another executive session, but before we do that, let's take care of public comment and the board's self-evaluation survey. Is there any public comment? All right.
I wonder if during the survey we were getting feedback on this format versus Google Meeting.
Yeah, I think that when we get down to the other. So the first question is still off, and I can't find a copy of what it used to be to get, because it says, what was the level of engagement of all board members? Yes or no? I thought it was high or low, but it was high or low. Now it's yes or no. So we're just going to call yes high and no low. How's that for now? So what is the level of engagement of all board members?
Hi. How do I do this? Hi. Am I talking?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're not high, you're talking.
Shoot.
All right. Was the agenda followed? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no?
Yes.
Kristen, do you have a question or is that a yes? Yes.
It's a yes, sorry.
Oh, no. I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Other feedback for me, for the chair?
I think this may be the shortest board meeting we've ever had.
Yeah.
Not done yet. I haven't said it because I'm worried we're not done.
Dawn,
Yes.
I don't mind doing the survey ever. It won't let me in.
Oh, okay.
So just if you want, I'm really always happy to do it, and I don't, but it hasn't let me in the last 3 months. So whenever you figure out the snafu of the survey,
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
thanks.
Okay. What went well with the meeting?
Very efficient. We had good things to say about our system and our district in a time of crisis, which is nice.
Okay. All right. What suggestions do you have? And specifically, did this work better or was Google Hangouts better?
This is better.
Yeah,
I like this
much better.
better.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I think this is better.
okay. All right.
So I'm sorry. Sorry,
Yeah.
Don. So do we have a district account now so that I could use that for our community engagement meeting?
We don't have a district account. We can look
Right
into-
now, they're offering free accounts though to organizations. So all you have,
They do.
all you have
Yes,
to
but
do is say what district and state you're from, and you'll have a free account. And they've even waived the 40-minute meeting rule.
okay. Okay,
Thank
that's what I
goodness
was
for you
wondering.
guys, but this is still pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering is if it was
They
limited.
waived it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think as our free trial ends, whenever that may be, it's probably something worth investing in a district account that allows us to have longer meetings.
Okay, I'm going to submit the survey. Okay, so we do need an executive session around Title I, BSA 5, 313A3, evaluation of an employee, and it is specific to the conversation around compensation for the superintendent. I don't expect it'll be a long one. I'm just wanting to check back in with everybody and see where we are. And then we've come out of executive session and adjourn. That's what I'm expecting. Okay, all right. And Chris, I'll just turn in the times so that you don't have to wait around. Okay. Are you leaving, Patrick, or are you gonna?
I'm gonna go digest the governor's most recent press conference, so I'll be in my office and I can lock up when you're done.
All right, not inviting anybody? No, we're not inviting anybody, so I'll take a motion to go into executive session under Title I, BSA 5, 313A3, evaluation of an employee.
So moved, Sarah McLean.
Second, Steve Rooney.